he is, God, he has got so much damn potential.
He definitely does.
He's got so much potential.
But he comes back from every fight that he's had better, you know? I mean, when one of the most impressive ones was he knocked out Klitschko. Oh my God.
Klitschko's seen better days, though.
Another inconsistency in Anthony Joshua. I now understand, I believe having watched this, where Jake Paul is getting his confidence from. How he's built this narrative in his head that he genuinely has a chance. I think the thing to remember here, though, is that Anthony Joshua doesn't struggle against all smaller fighters.
This might be his last fight, getting in there with Anthony Joshua and getting knocked.
And Mike Tyson break down the Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua matchup by emphasizing just how different these two fighters truly are. Tyson warns that Joshua must control his punches because Jake simply isn't on his level, while Rogan describes Joshua as one of the scariest men in boxing and points out how dangerous this fight is for Paul, especially since Paul's experience has mostly come from exhibitions with older or retired fighters. Both men make it clear that Jake is stepping into territory far beyond anything he has faced before.
It's one of the craziest propositions of all time. You take a guy who just had a boxing match that looks like a sparring match with a 58-year-old Mike Tyson, and then you're going to fight one of the absolute scariest knockout artists in the heavyweight division. Maybe we should watch the Francis Ngannou fight so you could see. Let's watch that real quick, just so you can see what Anthony Joshua is capable if he's fighting someone that's not in his league. Okay, look, Usyk beat him, and he beat him twice, and Andy Ruiz caught him in the first fight and dropped him and stopped him. It was spectacular. Andy Ruiz is super fucking talented. Usyk is perhaps the great.
Concept host explains that, for Jake Paul, being knocked out by a single punch from Anthony Joshua is actually safer than taking 8 rounds of sustained punishment, which could cause long-term damage. Even with Joshua being required to use smaller 10-oz gloves, the risk remains severe because less padding increases the chance of a knockout. The host emphasizes that while the gloves are a technical adjustment meant to balance spectacle and safety, they cannot erase the massive gap in power, experience, and skill, meaning every punch Joshua throws still carries serious consequences for Paul.
There really is only one outcome that can hurt Jake in this scenario, and that's that he gets viciously knocked out. Or he gets beat up really bad for 8 rounds and then viciously knocked out. I saw Nikisa talking on Ariel Helwani's show today about this, about like how it's not necessarily something they're worried about that Jake gets knocked out, because he's not afraid of the one-punch knockout as much as he's afraid of like Jake getting beat up for 8 rounds badly and it, you know, causing some real cognitive damage. And there is science behind the fact that the more repeated head trauma is the more dangerous thing about pro boxing, because those gloves, you can get hit, you get 8 to 10 seconds to stand, and you can repeat it 2-3 times in the same fight, just absorbing punch after punch. So in the totality of Jake getting like knocked out cold, is that the worst thing possible for his health? I mean, who knows, dude? You could have a freaking brain aneurysm when you get hit off one shot from a guy like AJ. Again, knock on wood, you don't want to see any of that happen. If his career ends because AJ hurts him badly, then yes. But if it's a knockout where Jake is able to then continue fighting, people will still watch. It may not be as big as the AJ fight, but he still has an opportunity to make money in boxing. Again, the only way it wouldn't be the case is if Jake got like permanently injured from this fight, which is part of the reason that they take this fight, is because Jake doesn't really have anything to lose here outside of, again, the bodily harm. You know, you fight a guy like Tommy Fury again, which I want to see, I think is more competitive, but doesn't bring the eyes that AJ does. So again, this is the entertainment business, and these Netflix fights are made for a massive audience. But you lose to Tommy Fury again, even by decision, that deflates Jake more than a knockout from Anthony Joshua. A loss to KSI deflates Jake more than a loss to Anthony Joshua. This is a perfect, even if Jake would have gotten just schooled by Gervonta Davis, it would have deflated him more than a knockout, I think. But yeah, it's a lot of risk, a lot of reward, but as far as your marketability, as
Nikisa by Darian reveals why Anthony Joshua was chosen as Jake Paul's opponent, explaining that because the entire buildup is being documented for Netflix, they needed a matchup with maximum visual and narrative impact. Joshua fits perfectly, a global superstar, a former world champion, and a name that instantly elevates the stakes. His presence makes the event more marketable, more dramatic, and far more compelling for audiences and media, which is exactly what Netflix and the organizers wanted for this high-profile production.
And, you know, Jake Paul being Jake Paul, he wanted to focus on the biggest, baddest names possible. That included Terrence Crawford, that included Ryan Garcia, that included Tommy Fury, that included Anthony Joshua. And we probably had, I don't know, 30 or 40 names that we kind of reviewed. And I will say at least 12 or 13 names that agreed to do the fight. Some within the 2-week period, actually. But from a Netflix perspective, they were very keen on Joshua. They were interested on Crawford. They were interested in Ryan Garcia as potential opponents for Jake Paul. They were interested in Tommy Fury at some level as well. And the one that Jake gravitated towards was Anthony Joshua. Once it became clear Ryan couldn't do the fight as well, Ryan was also something that he was interested in doing. And the deal came together mostly because Jake mentioned this as of March of this year, right? That's the first time he was on a podcast and said, I think I can beat Anthony Joshua. Everyone laughed. At the time, Eddie Hearn said this is another, media attention-seeking moment for Jake Paul. I made it clear then to Eddie and to the media, Jake was serious and we wanted to do it in 2026. We had further conversations with Matchroom in July of this year with the understanding that if Jake got through Tank Davis, and even though that was an exhibition, it was very much structured to be a real fight in every way, shape, and form, then we would look to make Jake versus Joshua in 2026. So that gave us a head start in terms of trying to come to an agreement with Matchroom and AJ, and we were able to get it done.
I just want to ask about a couple of those names that you mentioned. Garcia's interesting because a day or so later, Oscar De La Hoya said he's a DAZN fighter, this ain't happening, and of course we know there's no...
Ryan Garcia breaks down how devastating a loss to Anthony Joshua could be for Jake Paul, both physically and professionally. He warns that Joshua's punching power is on a completely different level, and that a knockout defeat could reshape Jake's career, reputation, and future in the sport. Garcia stresses that this is not just another celebrity showdown. It is a true test against an elite heavyweight, and Paul must be fully prepared if he wants any chance of surviving the danger Joshua brings into the ring.
I think that this has been a misstep from Jake. I think he wanted to make his partners at Netflix a little too happy, and he's gonna walk into it. But look it, he loses to AJ. Where does he go from here? Who does he fight? You gonna go back down to 135?
The problem is not that he loses to AJ. The problem is the way he's gonna lose to AJ might be life changing.
Right.
So that's the real issue.
It could be life changing in many ways, right? Physically.
Yeah.
See what he did in Nagano. It's like, but then again, if he gets knocked out, he gets knocked out.
Frank Martin acknowledges the massive financial reward attached to the fight, but reminds everyone that the money doesn't erase the danger Jake Paul is walking into. He stresses that this is not just a payday. It is a brutal challenge against an opponent with far more experience, power, and technical maturity. Martin warns that Paul should have thought carefully before accepting the fight because the physical and reputational risks are real, and no amount of hype can protect him once the bell rings.
Jake now, I wouldn't consider him like a YouTube fighter no more. I feel like he put in the time. He gotten better throughout all his fights. He done got better throughout all those fights, But it's still when you fighting fighters who actually done it for their whole life, it's a little different. If that fight happened, it'll be a good money fight. It'll be a good money fight. But that's a tough task for, Jake going to get that big ass heavyweight AJ. I know AJ personally, so that's tough.
Nelson suggests that if Jake Paul gets knocked out in this fight, it could mark the end of his career as an active boxer. He explains that Paul has become a major source of income for top fighters like Joshua, often offering huge financial incentives to make these matchups happen, which has sparked conspiracy theories about whether he can continue after this bout. Nelson says this fight is a turning point, a massive financial opportunity, but also a moment of extreme personal risk that could permanently redefine Paul's future in boxing.